you.
Thank you so much, Nabil, for the incredibly kind words. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to work with you to build out this program. You're a very valued community partner and ally. To start off our event, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge whose land we are on. An important part of moving forward is understanding our past and what that entails. I will do a land acknowledgement for Waterloo, Ontario, since that is where I am tuning in from today. So I want to acknowledge that we will be chatting with three phenomenal women about their journeys to leadership on land situated on the Haldeman Tract. This land was promised to the Haudenosaunee of the Six Nations of the Grand River and are within the territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Today we have a fantastic panel discussion for all of you tuning in. From our Technovation girls participants across Canada, undergraduate students in our community at large, I welcome you. We're going to start off with some questions that I have for our panelists, and as Nabil said, we will incorporate some audience questions. To make it easier for us to track the questions that are coming in, I ask that you keep the conversations in chat related to what we're discussing. Now, let's turn our attention to our panelists who are going to share with us their paths to where they are today and the importance of diversity in leadership. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us. Joining me today, we have the Honourable Bardish Chagger, the incumbent Waterloo MP and Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth. The first person in this role, she is no stranger to making history in Canadian government. From 2016 to 2019, Minister Chagger was the first woman in Canada's history to hold the position of the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons, an absolutely incredible achievement. Also joining me is Andrea Curry, who started off her career in management consulting out on the East Coast, moved to R&D, and then was an entrepreneur with Shift Energy, where she worked to reduce energy waste in buildings. Finally, now she's here joining me in Waterloo as the Senior Vice President of Product Management at Axonify. So many hats over the years, and I'm excited to dive deeper into all of them. And Neha Kara, an electrical engineer by trade with an MBA. Neha began her career as a software developer before moving into the world of finance and investing in entrepreneurs and their ideas with Mars Investment Accelerator Fund and 500 startups. She is currently at 2048 Ventures, where she is a partner. Such incredibly rich and diverse backgrounds with so much to learn from. So let's dive right in. My first question is going to be for all of our panelists, but let's start with Minister Chagger. Please share with us what your journey to today looked like, and feel free to go as far back as you would like and end it off with what your current role entails.
First of all, Ray, shout out to you, woman, and the tremendous work that you are doing and just the people that you have empowered. And not just empower, the fact that you enable women and girls to understand that they not only belong, but they can do whatever they put their minds to. So for myself, I got involved in the political process when I was 13 years old. I love the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. With rights and freedoms come responsibilities. And my parents had immigrated from India. Well, my grandfather came first. And India is the largest democracy in the world when it comes to the number of people. So for me, I have been fighting for people who don't always have their voices heard since long before I can remember. But when I was 13, my dad got me involved in politics, and we put out signs for Andrew Tlegde, who is actually going to become the member of parliament in 1993 when Jean Chrétien won a majority. And that's when I got involved. And I never thought I would run to become the member of parliament. I never thought that I would be at the cabinet table. And oftentimes that's because no one within the Waterloo region really looked like me. So therefore, I just didn't think it was possible. But little did I know, Andrew Tlegde was taking me under his wing. And here we are. So with a lot of experiences, but well before I could vote, I was fighting for same-sex marriage, something that my culture and community doesn't always understand, but they've come to appreciate and accept. Fought for dying with dignity, which is now known with medical assistance in dying. Fought for the legalization of cannabis. And now we as a government have legalized it, and the world continues to turn. And we're actually focused on, making decisions on evidence and science rather than ideology. So that's a little bit about me and how I got to where I am.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's clear that you're passionate about what you do, and it shows in the work that you do and how you interact with your constituents and anyone you interact with. So thank you so much. Next, Andrea. I kind of dived a little into it, but you can probably much better explain the path that you followed to get to Senior VP of Product Management.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll repeat those comments that it's an honor to be part of tonight and to get to help out this great organization. So, you know, I grew up on the East Coast of Canada in a little town outside of a little town, St. John, New Brunswick. And I went to university out there, studied business, and then really just happened to be recruited into management consulting. And the consulting firm that I was recruited by actually was closing down operations in the East Coast at the time. And I relocated to Ontario the first time then. And so I worked for that consulting firm for a number of years. I developed, I coded, I tested. I was always on the software side. And essentially ended up working really for an incubator for startups that was inside that organization. And then I sort of just went native. I started working for some of the companies that we had been incubating. And since then, I've really worked for software companies, you know, small and large. As you mentioned, I have been a founder, and I've also worked in some really large organizations. At some point, I crossed from the services side purely over into the pure product side. And today I'm the Senior Vice President of Product Management locally here at a company called Axonify, which happens to be one of the most diverse companies in the region. We actually, for a tech, purely tech company, half of our executive team is female, and we're about 50-50 split amongst our employees as well. So that's a little bit about me and my long, windy journey here.
Yeah, which is awesome. And awesome to see that you're working at a company that has shown that the 50-50 or having a staff that is more proportional to the population is beneficial and absolutely valuable. Thank you. And finally, Neha, if you could share with us how you ended up at 2048 Ventures.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ray. And I echo all the comments. Thanks so much for having me tonight. It's an honor. So I, you know, it's been a long journey, but similar to many kids that grew up in the 90s, I was always enamored with technology from a very young age. I remember playing with DOS with my dad, and I remember, you know, CDs for AOL coming through the mail and tinkering and what is all this internet business that's going on. So I developed a love and a passion for it from a very young age, and was encouraged to really follow through with that, and encouraged by my parents to pursue an engineering degree, where I continued to just gain more and more exposure to this world. And you know, I never really, I'm not a very good goal setter, so I never had a clear idea of what I was going to do post engineering, but I always knew that I loved this industry. I never wanted to leave it, and I always wanted to, you know, chart a path where I was doing really exciting things. And as soon as something I was working on stopped being excited, I would push myself to look for something new. And that's kind of how I serendipitously landed in venture capital. And the moment I landed here, which was almost a decade ago, I knew that this was not only something I loved, but that I was actually good at. And so I continued to push my way forward. I've been at 3 different venture funds. 2048 is the most recent, which I joined just actually 3 months ago. And I you know, hope to stay in this industry for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love that you mentioned not really having a goal and just going where challenged you and where pushed you. And I think a lot of students on the call today will probably relate to that a lot. Going through your undergrad, you know, when you apply to school, you have to make a decision when you're 18 for the rest of your life, which is so big. But it's awesome to see that you can go through that and not have like a set plan, but just know what you want to follow and come out fantastic. So that's awesome. Thank you. The 3 of you, as we've just heard come from three very distinct fields, but three fields that really work together and rely on each other in some way to be successful. But outside of that, there's a really great common thread between the three of you, and that is that you are leaders. So I'd love if you could share what being a leader means to you and what you feel personally your biggest asset as a leader is. And we'll kick it off with Andrea.
Sure. I think really when it comes down to leadership, I think for me, it's always been about having a set of values and living by those values, I think. I mean, it sounds like not something you're going to read about in a leadership book somewhere. And I'm not saying those books aren't worth reading. For sure, there's great kind of tips and tricks in there. But I think when I think about the leaders that I've followed and been drawn to in the past, they've been leaders who had a shared set of values and beliefs and ideologies with me. And it's been easy to follow them and learn from them and learn how to put those into practice day to day. And when I think about my team, I think, or any team really, I think the reason we jive is because we all, have maybe the same work ethic and we all have the same commitment to each other and supporting each other. And we all have, a similar sense of what's acceptable or what's not acceptable. And so to me, it's really always been about sticking to what I think is right and doing right by people at the end of the day. So more than a specific, I would say, tactic or approach specifically.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And Neha, what does leadership mean to you and your biggest asset in leading a team?
Yeah, great question. Leadership in the venture capital industry is a really hard term to swallow because you are, you realize that you're really not as smart as you think you are, unfortunately. And there's so many humbling moments along, my journey every single day. And, I think the biggest asset of being a leader in this industry is honestly just having a lot of empathy because you're talking to, brilliant founders day in and day out who are sharing their passion and their visions with you. And you may not always agree with what they're doing, but, you have to remind yourself that these are their companies, and just having empathy and really understanding that you don't have all the answers and you can't predict the future and where this world is going, I think is what ends up making one of, a really strong leader in this industry. And I think with us having more women enter the world of venture capital, it's making for a much better experience for companies and startups all around because women have a lot of, traits that really serve this industry well.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And Minister Chagger, if you could round off the group answer for us.
I would echo the comments that both Andrea and Neha have made. I think part of leadership is also being true to your authentic self. And so therefore bringing what you bring to the table. I think sometimes we try to emulate and be what we've seen others do, but each of us has something unique to offer. And I think there's good in that. So if we can be true to ourselves and the decisions we make, then it is really about how we stay true to, I would say, once again, about the values. And I think that resonates true with me, or real with me, is that if I'm proud of the decisions I make and I'm true to the decisions I make, then I will give good advice. And I also think leadership is about leaving the ladder down. So as we obtain opportunities and are able to progress, is making sure that we're bringing people along with us and not rising to the top by pushing people down, rather by bringing others with us, because we want the leaders that take our roles on to actually, I would say, like for me, the next MP for Waterloo, the next person to take on my role, any role that I've had at the cabinet table, I want them to do even better than I do. So I want to make sure any of the hurdles that I've had to come across do not exist for them. And so providing them the blueprint to success so that they can actually achieve and go further, because part of it is the systemic issues that exist in our country, and we know they're real. So we cannot continue to perpetuate them. So how do we actually break that down and make sure that we are looking at the people who are part of the decision-making process and bringing more people in?
Yeah, wonderful. And I love your point of you want who comes after you to do better, and setting a blueprint for them. And I think the three of you are giving a really great piece of that blueprint for some of our listeners today. So thank you. My next question, again, this will be for everyone, because I'd love to hear, I think for me, I'm like closer to the beginning of my career, and I don't know quite yet exactly what the trajectory will be. I think I'm kind of like Neha, where I know what I really like and I know the area, but I'd love to know from the three of you, and actually Neha, if you can start, when did you realize that this was the trajectory that your career would follow?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I kind of alluded to before, Ray, I didn't ever, when you sit in an interview and you get asked the question, what are your 3 to 5 year goals? I hate that question. I never know. Honestly, it's just so hard, particularly in university when you're learning so much and you really don't know what your, degree necessarily translates to when it comes to the real working world and jobs. So I think it's okay to accept the fact that there's going to be ambiguity in your career. And I think instead of thinking about, specific jobs, really hone in on things that you're, skills that you've got and values that you've got and things that you're passionate about. And that can translate into so many different jobs and industries. To help you chart your path, right? So if you're good with people, then maybe you want to focus on something there. If you're really good with, numbers, maybe you want to focus there. But I also, give people a lot of advice that the world is changing so much, and what the world looks like today may not be the same in 5 years. So it's really good to try to keep yourself open and nimble. And tell you, I hope that one day everybody lands somewhere where they feel like I've nailed it. This is it. That's kind of how I felt when I landed in venture capital. And like I said, I hope to stay here for a while, but up until then, I was quite open and nimble.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Mr. Chagger, if you could share, because we have a similarity in our backgrounds of we're both Waterloo Science graduates. So I'd love to know how you went from a degree in the sciences to the cabinet.
So I would say, oh, I love that. And, Ray, I hope you are elected as a member of parliament and at the cabinet table, because I think that's let me know how I can help.
Yeah.
So I chose in grade 6 to actually go into science. I went to a day with a difference at the University of Waterloo. And it was this one-day conference at the University of Waterloo, and you saw women in fields of science. And it was because we need more women in science. And so that was a long time ago, but I didn't actually realize at that time that none of those women that were at the front of the room actually looked like me. And I think that's where it's really been about how do we make sure that we are making our decisions based on science and evidence and not ideology. So I always say that the University of Waterloo is where that foundation was laid within me. And that's also why I say, as much as the world needs more Canada, Canada needs more Waterloo. Because I think we are a community that raises children, we lift each other up. So I think the House of Commons also needs people not to be all doctors and lawyers. So how do we bring in engineers and science and entrepreneurs and people who've worked in the not-for-profit sector to help us make better decisions? So I would say my trajectory was not actually to become the member of parliament or a cabinet minister. And if I can give any advice and guidance to anyone listening, I would say don't shut any doors. It's easy to say, no, I don't want to, but it's really hard just to try it. And to try something, you might actually like it. And if you don't, sure, let it go, but give it a go, give it a try. And I'll tell you that there's people in my world that believed in me a lot more than I believed in myself. And I think part of the foundation I want to leave for the people who come after me is that I want every individual to recognize that they have something to contribute and they actually are absolutely perfect the way that you are. And whatever that is will shine. And I think that's where, when I listen to Andrea and listen to Neha, I also resonate with that, because we kind of end up where we're meant to be. Like there's this beautiful thing that takes place. And there might be some bumps along the way, but those bumps make us the individuals we are. And today is Let's Talk Day, and mental health is real. And I think we're really good at taking care of everyone around us. We're not always so good at taking care of ourselves. And I think that's part of all of this, is actually taking the time to remind ourselves that we're good people and that we do good things and we deserve to be happy and successful and healthy. And I think that's where we need to spend some time, not always worrying about everyone else, but ourselves. And that has to be part of the trajectory. Like if you want to do something and there's anything stopping you, and oftentimes it's the voices in your own head saying that you can't do it, how do we put those voices to ease? And how do we put that confidence within you to say, you can do whatever you want to do? And people like me will walk with you on your journey to see you succeed. So know that you have allies. And for a lot of us, allyship is not just a noun, it's a verb. We want to act on it. We want to help you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's a noun. It's not a noun, it's a verb and something should be act on. Andrea, you mentioned going from kind of purely service over into product, and you said you're not sure when, but can you maybe kind of pinpoint when you felt the shift of, oh, I feel like I'm being pulled a little more over here than where I am now?
Yeah, it's funny. Like the others have said, I've never really known I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, if you will. And I think that's a decision that we don't really have to make. We just have to decide what we want to do next. And so, there was a point where I was working for tech companies, really starting their services practices for them. And an opportunity, to be completely honest, I sort of burned out from the travel. And it was around the time when I was thinking about starting a family, and I needed to cut back on travel. Up until that point in my career, I'd really been flying out somewhere every Monday and flying back every Thursday night for 10 years. And so, that just wasn't going to work for me going forward. And I needed a change of pace, and an opportunity presented itself at Symantec, which is a large software company, was one of the largest at the time. And it was actually an opportunity to build a product outside a product. So it was an R&D role, but they were actually hiring the role into sales. And then through mergers and acquisitions and just changes, I ended up getting floated into R&D. So I'd love to say that there was, me saying, I want to consciously be a product leader, or I want to consciously be an R&D leader, but it actually was just really me taking advantage of a great opportunity that was going to be less travel and fit more into my work-life balance. I, at the time, perceived myself to be taking a break and almost a step back to take that internal role, because my career up to that point had been very fast-paced. And that absolutely wasn't the case. I think, what everyone has said about taking care of yourself, it doesn't always pan out the way you think, where you think you're sacrificing something because of a choice you make. Oftentimes it just opens another door, as they say. And so that was really the beginning of my career in the R&D side. And then I found out I was really, pretty good at it. I think all the skills that I had built in like repeated delivery that you need on the consulting side helped me have kind of structure on the R&D side. The piece that was missing was the innovation. And so that, it was like a whole other world when I landed in that side, when all the diversity and complexity that you need to actually innovate was like a completely different world that I had to learn. And it's been way more interesting, I think, than for me personally than the prior career. So it was good luck, really, at the end of the day.
Which is great. And it's great that the three of you had a kind of a similar answer in, we don't know, this is where we were and this is where we ended up, and here we are now. And it really is sometimes just right place, right time. And even Andrea, you saying you took a step back and it led you, kind of changing career courses, but into something that ended up being a really great fit for you and that you really enjoyed. And it's funny how life can kind of give us cues even when we aren't necessarily looking at them that way. And it parlays really nicely into our first audience question of how do you balance your priorities and your well-being, which I think is such a great conversation to have, especially with Mr. Chagger mentioning today is Bell Let's Talk Day, and Andrea, you touching on, kind of shifting to balance family and work. So any takers on how you balance your priorities and your well-being? Of course, there's no perfect answer, but.
I mean, I can jump in. Like I do have I'm curious if the others have a completely opposing view, but the term work-life balance, I find really stressful. Like it's like another thing I have to achieve. And I actually think the way I make it work is I deal it all into the same schedule. Like I can't have, I've never been good at having like really firm beginnings and ends of things. And I try to protect, buckets of time for different kinds of activities. But if I need to leave in the middle of the day to, take my daughter to the orthodontist, I don't feel bad about that at all. And if I need to log on at 9 o'clock at night to get on a conference call with Asia, I don't feel bad about that at all. So to me, like I just have to deal it all into the same pie and let the chips fall where they can, and make sure that there's some rough equality and a little bit of time for me in there too, which I've gotten way better at protecting over time. But that's my approach. I don't know I'm curious what the others think as well.
Yeah, no, I think Andrea nailed it. I think that's a really great way of synthesizing it. I should actually think about it like that, not time blocking so much. I think I'm with Andrea. My world has just become really fluid. My worlds have all collided, personal and work. I think the one area I personally struggle at, Andrea, which you mentioned you're getting better at, is time for me. I find I'm always giving. I also have a young family, so and when I do give myself me time, I feel so recharged and so much better. And getting me time involves asking for help. And I think that's something I need to work on personally doing, is to remind myself I can't do everything. I'm not superwoman by any means, and bring in some, reinforcements to help me and give me a break. And so that's one way which I'm trying to get better at putting my own priorities first.
Yeah.
I'll just jump in and I will echo, but I think part of it is just the way we have been raised and what we believe to be true. I think when it comes to the stigma around mental health, it's very real. And mental health impacts everyone. And so some people are bold and brave enough to talk about it, and others are still hiding it. And I think that's challenging. But I would say the better care we take for our own selves, the better care than we can do for others. And I'm really lucky that I have a lot of people that are around me that are very supportive. But even for myself, I have moments where I find it challenging to ask for help. And that's where I think it is a matter of saying it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to ask for help. And the whole concept of balance, Andrea, you are so correct. Like, you don't have to balance it. There's going to be days where, work, because they're like in the world of politics and like running a country. So there's certain days that you just have to be able to give it, a lot more than 50%. And then there's other days, like for tomorrow, I put in my calendar, it's a personal day. And so, yes, I'll be at question period. Yes, I will be doing things to make sure if there is any crises that I am available by phone and so forth. But otherwise, it is a day that is going to be my day. I'm going to make sure that my family members have some of the things that they need to taken care of. And I'm also going to maybe tidy up my room or something. So I just think that's where I marked it. And that's one of the commitments I made for myself in 2021, is that I'm going to mark days as personal days, and I'm going to make sure that I take care of myself so that I can do a better job at taking care of others.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of my favorite quotes is, yeah. Please do share. And I hope it does. I hope you enjoy your personal day and you get to check off all the items on your list. But one of my favorite quotes is, you can't serve from an empty vessel. And it's so true of running a great party, but also just being a supportive human, is you can't give to others if you don't have anything to give to yourself? And I think this rolls really beautifully into our next audience question from Meg, who is a Torontonian living in San Diego. And she asks about dealing with self-doubt and that inner critic, who sometimes can be constructive and helpful, but other times can be a little bit of a deterrent and really you getting in your own way. Neha, do you maybe want to start us off? Ooh, oh, perfect.
I was going to say, I am my biggest critic. And I think that's the comment I was making earlier, right? Like there's people around me who have a lot more confidence in myself than I do in myself, which I think is unfortunate. And I think sometimes we need to actually take time to look at what we can accomplish and what we do and how we contribute. And it might not always be perfect, but it is the best we can be and we learn from it. I think that's why knowledge is power and ignorance is a choice. So if we are able to contribute and be part of whatever you want to do, then that's a really good thing. But I think oftentimes I have yet to meet someone who has not related to the fact that they are the person that stops them most often. And I think that's where the next generation, I really want to see, I want them to be their number one fan. And I want them to actually realize their potential and know that they are awesome and that we all want to see them succeed because it's just a different approach. But oftentimes I do think, especially as women, we hold ourselves back. And I think we've been kind of put into responsibilities, whether it's, providing care for your children because you're a mother or having responsibilities as a spouse or whatever it is. But everyone has those responsibilities, meaning your partner as well. And they're just as serious for them. Like for me, my father is my backbone. He is my number one fan, and he's the person I go to on my best days and my worst. And for him, parenthood was just as important to him as it was to my mother. My mother brought me into the world, but my father would oftentimes wake up in the middle of the night when I was not feeling well or if I, had a scratchy back or whatever else. And so he's really been a partner in that. Oftentimes we never talked about it because in our culture, it's the woman that would do that job. And I think that's where I do now share those stories just to show that, no, my dad was an equal player in the work that we did. And it's okay for him to be proud of the contributions he made. So I think it's really about that's what I think we need to balance more than the work-life balance is actually how do we take time to appreciate ourselves and not just be so tough on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for jumping in.
Yeah, that was so well
said.
Yeah, really well said, really eloquent. I think the only thing I would add is just, I continue to face imposter syndrome every single day. I don't think it's something that ever goes away. I hope I'm not the only one. I might be, but I remember, I wonder sometimes if imposter syndrome for women really comes from the fact that, oftentimes we enter industries and roles where there aren't a lot of other role models. And so you wonder, oh my goodness, what am I doing here? Do I even belong here? I remember feeling like that in my engineering undergrad. I think there was 10% women, so about 10 women in the class. And, oh my goodness, they picked the wrong person. What am I doing here? But I've learned over the years that there's this constant battle between your head and kind of your core. Your core knows what your worth is. Your core knows not to ever, go for something that you're not valued at, or know to hold yourself to a higher standard. And then your head kind of comes in the way and talks you out of it. So what I've learned to do is if you're ever feeling that feeling come over you, where you're afraid or you're talking yourself out of something, you're feeling imposter syndrome, just give yourself a moment to really regroup and recenter your energy. And you'll, really understand that true to yourself, you you can do something deep inside, your worth. So that's how I've learned to deal with it.
Awesome, thank you. And Andrea, anything to add?
I think more just like a really pragmatic tip when you get in that room and for whatever reason you're worried that like what you're feeling might not be right, like get the data. Like I always find I can fall back on data. So sometimes I will sit in a meeting and, you know, I'll not agree, and I'll leave the meeting and I'll, you know, start just trying to get all the data on like, is this real? And, you know, a lot of the time other people are sometimes misinformed. And, you know, I think we as women do question ourselves, and, you know, we want to maybe not speak up unless we're pretty sure. And I think like just getting the data, and I think that goes from everything from like the very specific issue in the one meeting, you know, to some degree to the mental health and confidence side of it, which is, you know, if you look at the facts, like of what you really did in that room versus your own maybe emotional response to something, you know, you're usually more right than maybe you thought you were, in a lot of cases. So I think that can be a really useful tool, like, is if you find yourself in that situation, just to like, you know, take a breath, get the data, and then figure out what's what. And then, you know, it gives you like, you know, the ability to come to the table with the facts and having the data is very powerful, I think. And it's hard to be powerless when you have the facts.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. And Andrea, actually, I'm going to direct this next one to you because I think you can probably answer really well. But Courtney, a software developer joining us, says that they're looking for companies that do good for the environment and are socially conscious. And wondering, how do you recommend looking for companies that are like that, or maybe key things that hint to those values?
Yeah, no, I love that. And there's so many people, in particular young people, that are looking for companies that have great sustainability records and things today. It's something I'm very passionate about. I think like there's a few things you can do as you're even, you know, combing for companies. And it's really like, look at their track record. So, you know, they say past performance predicts future behavior. So a lot of people will say, oh, we're so socially conscious, but like, what are their hiring practices really? And, you know, what have they really, you know, given to local charities and causes? What are they doing for sustainability if that's one of your passions? Do they even have a plan? So lots of people will say we're green, but if they can't tell you the plan or what they're actually doing, then, you know, and it doesn't really even to me matter where they are on the plan, as long as they're moving forward or moving in the right direction. That's just my personal belief. There's also actually something out there called a B Corp, which is a voluntary certification. I probably wasn't prepared to talk about this, so I'm probably not describing it accurately, but it's a voluntary certification that a company can get to say that they're pledged to a certain level of transparency around those kinds of practices. So I think fair trade is part of it. Definitely the environment is part of it. So they've gone above and beyond to do this certification. So if you run into a company that has that certification, it's a good sign that they're, you know, down the path in terms of their commitment. And there's other things too. Like if you're looking at a pure like consumer or product company, for instance, there's something called Good Guide, which will rate all their products from a sustainability standpoint and an ethical standpoint. So there's like lots of resources and places out there that you can look for kind of the proof that they're practicing.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like a lot of people always turn to the tool of social media to see what are companies posting. Are they sharing about, you know, like I know, for example, Axonify has a Life at Axonify account, and I'm sure prospective employees would love to see that of, well, what are they doing at Axonify outside of the office? And, you know, looking at how are you treating your employees, and do they get along, and, you know, are they taking part in things in the community? Yeah, really cool about the B Corp certification. That wasn't something that I knew about, but is a fantastic resource to know about. Yeah, wonderful. We have another audience question here, and I'm going to direct this to Neha, because you kind of touched on this in talking about being one of very few women in your electrical engineering class. And somebody asked, why are women not going into, they asked specifically CS, but I'm going to kind of open it up broader to programming and tech. But why are women not going into these areas as much as they should be?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Ray. I know there was a lot of great research done actually by the University of Waterloo that was trying to unpack this question, and that actually saw rates of women entering these degrees drop over the last 20 to 30 years. And a lot of research has been done, and I think some of the findings are surprising in that women's exposure and interest to STEM related fields is actually starting at a younger and younger age, you know, as early as 3 or 5 years old. And so getting young girls that kind of exposure is becoming more and more critical. I know sometimes when you think about that age group, you think about, okay, well, how are toys set up? You know, you've got girls' toys and boys' toys, and typically Lego tends to fall into the boys' camp, although now it's starting to branch out. You know, that's just one silly example, but there's so many different things in our society that, kind of are conducive to boys being more adept with math and science and kind of getting more exposed to that side of things versus girls. So that's one theory. Other than that, I think there's definitely a misconception with these fields. I think, women and girls maybe just don't know the career paths that are possible with a STEM degree. I actually think a STEM degree is one of the most versatile degrees to have because it opens up so many doors and you're not necessarily pigeonholed into one area. I mean, Bagdish is nodding. She's, science to politics. That's an amazing example. And so, anytime I bump into a young woman, I say definitely consider it because there's so many possibilities that you just don't know about. But those are definitely a couple of theories. Obviously, I don't think we've really pinpointed what's going on, but I hope that those numbers are starting to come back up.
Yeah, totally. And I can at least say for women in computer science at UW, we are seeing an uptake in the women that we have joining CS, and our percentages are going up, which is really exciting and great to see. But yeah, I don't think there's anything pinpointed to it, but exposure is so important, and exposure at a young age. And I think just presenting it as an option, not a you have to do, but hey, did you know this is kind of a cool thing that you could do? So yeah, that's great. Thank you for answering that, because I know it's, like you said, there's no perfect answer. It's kind of a tough question, but thank you for tackling it. Our next question from an audience member. As I mentioned, we invited our Technovation Girls participants, and I'm assuming this is one of them, but they asked, what advice or resources would you give to Technovation participants that want to continue with their apps after the competition? So just to give a little background for the people on the call who aren't familiar with Technovation, it's a globally run program. I'm in charge of the Waterloo chapter, and we get girls ages 10 to 18 to work in teams of up to 5 girls with an industry mentor, or a parent or a teacher, just somebody who's willing to learn alongside with them. And we challenge them to identify a problem, either in their local community or the global community, and then build an app for that. And we teach them everything from how to think of the idea, to code it, to how to pitch it. And a lot of the students over the 4 months will build their app, but they continue it outside of the competition. And I think because they're so young, sometimes it's hard to find access to those resources to really be able to take it to a level where they can put it on market, or where they can get it in front of the right people. So I think that's what this participant is asking is, what advice or resources would you give for a student who went through these 4 months, is really excited and wants to keep going? Andrea, maybe you can touch on it since you have a bit of an entrepreneurship background.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a market and a need for people like that, like a bottomless need for people who want to continue. I think there's many ways you can move forward. There's probably programs, that I'm not aware of with the schools and things like that. But even if you approached a tech company like mine, a local tech company, I'm pretty sure like many of them would really struggle to say no to an opportunity to coach and mentor young people in building their own app. There's lots of startups here in town that, you know, me and many of my peers spend time with, you know, helping to coach and mentor those young leaders to get to the next level. And I find it hard to believe that, you know, even that we wouldn't continue to do that with even younger folks. So I think don't be shy about who you ask for help, and look for places that have all the skills that you need in general, that, you know, can help you. A lot of times apps and things are way ahead of the market. So I'll just say that it's very likely that some of you have built something that, you know, may not seem to have a huge pull even today, but 5 years from now, you know, the market will finally be ready. So it's kind of, the market can be a fickle thing, and like having the persistence to continually retest something without running out of money is often the problem once you got really into it. But having that persistence is, you know, really, really important. And I definitely encourage you to keep doing that, because even if that specific idea doesn't turn out to be the one, you're going to have learned something at a very young age. It's going to be, you know, something you can continually go back to. And to be honest, like when you get to my age, you have like a mortgage and kids in college to think about, and like more at risk. So I think it's actually one of the things when I think about myself, like when I was in my 20s and just starting out, I wish I'd started more companies at that age, because if I'd failed, I would have just, you know, moved back in with my parents for 6 months and started again. So just less to lose, and a great time to learn. So I definitely, you know, encourage you to keep going, and don't be shy about who you ask for help. I'm sure there are tons of people in your local community, tons of tech companies who would partner with you, lots of people who want to help you move on. You can call me.
Yeah. Hey, amazing. There you go. You can reach out to Andrea. There's a really great resource that you can reach out to. Mr. Chagger, do you have anything to add?
I guess just because I am who I am, I'm going to add to all 3 questions. So I would just say, when it comes to like environmentally conscious, socially conscious, we need this across the board. So whatever spaces you're occupying, if you can help bring them along, it's really important. So it's great when there is someone who's already on that path, because then we could probably accelerate the outcomes. But regardless of where you are, it's also similar to like diversity and inclusion, making sure that the decision-making table actually is representing the diversity of Canada. So how do we bring more people along? On the point in regards to why are more women not joining, I think it's great that we do see an increase of women joining, but we also want to see them graduate. And then the best way to actually have those conversations is by actually getting into people's backyards and finding out how we can improve it, because part of it is the systemic issues in the environment that exists. And oftentimes it's worth the battle, and sometimes it just isn't. And I think that's where, if we can actually allow people to focus on what they're trying to do, we will get there. Program that exists federally for young entrepreneurs is Futurepreneur, and it's for young people between the age of 18 to 39. If there is a desire to see programs to support startups earlier, right now we have a budget process going on. So have your say, contact your member of parliament, and let us know if you think that's a gap that needs to be filled. And every level of government has an opportunity to be able to contribute. So in the Waterloo region, we also have the the Waterloo Region Small Business Center, and they are able to contribute. And I just want to say, Ray, the Technovation Global Girls Coding Challenge, we saw Leah Uman and Ellen Breathley of Waterloo do very well. And they had an app for disaster relief. And it was actually quite innovative, and it was quite impressive. And Craig Norris from the CBC Kitchener Waterloo actually spoke about it. And I think we also have to do a better job at amplifying and lifting up some of these stories, so that other people can also see themselves doing this work and being able to contribute and actually using tech for good. And I think that's where the work that Technovation Girls is doing is, I think, not just empowering, but enabling. And I really wish it existed when I was growing up. So the future looks bright.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And thank you for mentioning Leah and Ellen. We're super proud of them and their continuation of the development of their app, which this past holiday season, they actually parlayed into being able to give gifts to seniors during the pandemic. So they're going strong and doing awesome. Neha, I'll get you to weigh in because you have a really cool perspective from the investment side. And as Andrea mentioned, you keep going until you run out of funds, but maybe you can just touch on what is something that would be really key for these participants to think of as they think of how to make their app appealing to investors.
Yeah, really great question. So one thing that a lot of people don't know about is typically when companies approach venture capitalists or professional investors, they've already gotten to a certain point, and so where do you get the capital to get to that certain point, right? Usually, surprisingly, it's family and friends, and we actually have a term for it. It's called family and friends round. So one thing I was thinking of when this question was asked was, pull up Kickstarter and create a goal for yourself and send it to everybody that knows you and supports you, because typically at that stage of your journey, people are going to invest in you because of you, not necessarily the idea, just because the idea is probably early. And then as things start to grow and you start to get some traction and momentum, that's when it's a great time to go to investors and say, I not only have a great idea and a great product, I've got a little bit of momentum. And then you'll see an outpouring of interest from the, more seasoned investor side. So yeah, I would just start with the Kickstarter and set a goal, 20 grand, 50 grand, whatever it is you think you need to kind of keep going and put it out into the ether. And I'm sure it'll surprise you how many people will come and support what you're working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And we will jump to our last question. I know we had some audience questions we didn't get to, but thank you so much for sending them in. But my last question for all of you, we've kind of touched on that a lot of our audience today are in school, whether that's elementary or secondary or post-secondary or beyond, or just as some like to say, the school of life. So if there is something that you could say to your younger self, something to encourage them to continue doing, what would that one thing be? And maybe, Andrea, we can start with you.
You saw me thinking, I feel like. I think it does really come down to what I mentioned earlier, which is taking more risks. Like if I, I think it does tie to the last question, but like, there's no reason not to try many things and to, I'm not saying not to stick things out or to try everything for 5 minutes, but there's no reason not to try a few things and learn about yourself and make lateral moves as much as you want and to take risk. If you have a great idea, there's no reason not to pursue it at a young age. And so, I think taking more risks is one thing I wish I told myself. And then I think the second thing is just don't worry about taking your career path too seriously. Like when I think about, like your valedictory speech and how it's like you're choosing your career for the rest of your life. I think you've heard, 3 examples here today where that wasn't inherently true. And there is, I think, like, 5% maybe the population that has a really great, I'm making this totally up, but has a really great life plan and will execute on that life plan and is great at working that way. For the rest of us, I think it's pretty daunting to think that you have to decide right now for the rest of your life. So I'd say just figure out where to start. Don't be afraid of taking risks, and you'll learn as you go where you'll naturally kind of bump along and learn where you need to be.
Oh, awesome. Mr. Chagger, what would you tell your young self to continue doing?
I just want to start by saying that Andrea did commend data and the importance of data, and then she just made data up, and I think that's awesome. So just wanted to give some recognition there.
I-
Thought that was superstarish. Because sometimes you just got to do what you have to do. If I could give advice to my younger self and give advice to anyone, I would probably remind myself that I am a good person and that I am perfect and awesome the way I am. And I think every individual needs to hear that you are amazing and perfect the way you are. And it's going to be okay. So you might not have everything figured out to the T, but leave doors open and try things that you never think you would try, because it's important to explore. The best natural renewable resource in our country is our people. It's the mind, because the mind loves to learn. We love to broaden our horizons. And I think that's why knowledge is power. And as much as it feels lonely sometimes and we feel like there's no one in our corner, there's lots of people that love you. They love you a lot. And I can promise you, I, for one, want to see you succeed and will do whatever I can to help you get there. And if you ask for help or you want to know what an entrepreneur or a CEO or what a cabinet minister or anyone has done, and you reach out to them and you ask to say, hey, can we have a phone call? The worst thing can happen is that they'll say no. But oftentimes you'll hear a yes, because most people actually want to give it back and pay it forward to see people behind them come and do even better. So just so you know, if there's anything that I can do for you, if you want to be the MP for Waterloo, let me know, because I want to see more women like me in these roles, and I want to help you get there. So just know that you're not alone. We love you and you're perfect the way you are. So just keep at it and we'll get there.
Thank you for that wonderful message, Mr. Minister Chagger. And Neha, what would you tell your younger self to keep doing?
Yeah, so I think the one thing I would tell my younger self to start doing, which I didn't do, maybe I'll start there, is I wish I had been a little bit more risk taking, particularly when it came to, starting to make money early in my career. I really wish I knew about the world of investing. And it's a timely topic right now, given what's happening in the public markets. But I wish I had just spent a little bit more time educating myself on the world of being smart with my money. So that's my tactical advice. Something that I think that I did and that I'm proud of is I never let my bar down. I always had an idea in my gut about what my value and the worth of my value was. And I had many people in my career tell me, you're not ready for this. And I thought I was. And I made my way, to get there. Without letting that hold me back. So stick to that. Like I said, I talked about the inner voice. You know yourself the best. You know how much you can accomplish, and really, really stick to it. And one last thing is also just around the idea of a mentor. There are certain people in your life that are going to champion you and realize your potential, possibly even more than you realize your own potential. Stick to those people like glue, because they will continue to open doors for you. It's not having a large quantity of these people, it's just having quality. So if there's one or two people that are like this in your life, stick to them like glue and let those doors swing wide open and walk right through them.
Wonderful. And with that, I think we are going to bring the panel to an end, a wonderful note to end on. I want to say thank you to Andrea, Minister Chagger, and Neha for taking the time out of your evening to join me today and to share your experiences and advice. I gained a lot from it, and I'm sure our viewers did, and I really, really, truly appreciate and value your time. A big thank you to our audience. As Nabil will excitedly tell you, Terminal Talks are usually in person because it's a great chance to come out and meet people and see the community. And obviously, given current times, we are doing this virtually, but it has allowed for some really great opportunities in that we could open it out to a much larger audience. So we have people from all ages, from across Canada, from around the world who are joining us, which is so amazing and so exciting. And in a time where we can't gather together to experience community, thank you for taking this hour to have some community time with us. I'd also like to thank Terminal and our live stream team for making this event oh so clean. And a really big thank you to our Technovation chapters from coast to coast for joining and for being the innovators of tomorrow. A copy of the recording will be sent out to everyone via email. Please continue to connect with Technovation. You can find us on Instagram at Technovation Waterloo, and stay in touch with Terminal. Find out when their next Tech Talk is. And you can find them at Join Terminal on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And with that, thank you so much for joining us, folks. That's a wrap, and we will see you next time.